In lesson 1.3, we really want to start to kind of identify and evaluate the different types of studies, right? We earlier talked about observational studies versus design experiments or experimental studies, which we sometimes call well-designed experiments versus observational studies. And then really thinking about what conclusions can we make, right, from that. So when we think about studies, we want to study us and collect data, but we're really trying to find out if there's an association, right? If there's some relationship between the data that we're looking at. Many times we're looking at what we call variables. Is there a relationship between, right, someone's race and the chance of divorce? Is there a relationship between someone's height and their IQ, right? We're looking at different things. And sometimes we do that through experiments, and sometimes we do that through observational studies like surveys, like a sample survey, which is just one method of collecting data, right? However, when we do that, um, how do we know if something directly causes something else to happen, right? That's much harder to prove in statistics. If something actually causes it. At most, what we can say is that there may be an association between those variables, like an association exists, right? Or relationships between two variables, right? Your major and your salary, right? We know there is a relationship between those things. We know that certain majors make more money, so there's an association, but we don't know, again, that there's a causal relationship, something to think about when we start to look at some of these examples and ideas, right? I know it may be hard to see in the video, the images, but you have these on your note sheets here, but really thinking about, you do see a difference here in this data between Republicans and Democrats, right? There's an association among white Democrats are much more likely to say that being white has helped them, right? Versus white Republicans. And so when you think about this here as we're looking, and it's also another variable has to do with age too, right? Or sorry, not age, but um, how much college or how much education you have, which is another important variable in our world. The amount of education someone has associations with other things, but we're not sure that it causes it without really doing a more in-depth study called an experimental study, right? And these ideas that we're talking about are what we call explanatory and response variables. So we now know what variables are, but are we able to connect? Can we say that one variable explains why the result of another variable occurs, right? And that's what we're talking about. Can we distinguish between a relationship, an explanatory variable and response variable relationship? What is the relationship? How does the explanatory variable affect or explain the outcome of a response variable? Again, important to pause and think about those terms, right? And look them up even further and think about, right? We have other names sometimes called independent variable or factors. And again, that's why it gets confusing in statistics. We use different terms many times. And so looking at another example here to finish this first part, right? When we think about, in this case, the explanatory variable is the amount of exercise. And what we're hoping somehow is that it explains, right, someone's energy level, that there's a relationship between them. And so that's what the EV we call, or an RV, the amount of exercise and energy level as outlined here. That's what we would be looking at. Now, suppose we compare the mean energy of those who exercise regularly more than 3 hours per week to those who do not, right? And we find those who exercise have a significant higher energy. Is this evidence to say exercise can increase energy? It's not, because we need to know more. There's an association, but we don't know that what we call it's causation. We know there's an association or correlation, but I can't say it causes it. We just see it, but there could be a lot of other factors, variables that explain someone's age, someone's weight, vitamins that they take, right? Those could be other things that determine that.